Hello, welcome back. If you follow me on Instagram, or possibly if you've seen me in some of the Discords, basically you may be aware that I have completed a Caliburn. This is the video about the Caliburn. I had been thinking about getting a Caliburn for some time. I just mostly couldn't commit and didn't feel like ponying up the cost, even though it's not a huge amount of money. It's more than I usually spend on something. Captain Slug basically did two things. He came out with the U version of the Caliburn, which honestly looked great and was supposed to resolve a number of issues that the original Caliburn might have had. And then over 2019's Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend, he also put everything as 20% off in his store. And I figured that was a good time to go ahead and buy one. So, as you are probably aware, I have a 3D printer, so there was no need to purchase printed parts from Captain Slug, so I just got the hardware kit. And since I'm a fairly tall individual with long arms, I got the full-size Caliburn. That's not to say that I will be using it necessarily with full-size darts, but I have multiple options with this. Now, the full list of options that I got was, I got the one with the K26 spring, even though essentially I can swap it out to another spring. I already have K26, I have K25, and I could do other things too, but I figured why not get the K26 with it. I got the version of the ramrod that has a channel cut for additional small O-rings for a better seal between ramrod and barrel, and I got the 18-inch aluminum barrel. Now, some of you may be wondering what's with that color scheme. Well, originally, I will put up a picture of what I had envisioned the Caliburn to look like, but recently I've been experimenting with printing PETG instead of PLA, and people say the PETG is supposed to be stronger and more heat resistant. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat, I don't think I quite know enough about printing PETG to do everything in it. So what ended up happening is, originally everything that's orange was slated to be orange, and then everything else was going to be blue, which is PETG. Unfortunately, a number of the parts broke. A number of the PETG parts broke, whether they were during the operation of the blaster or actually the print just didn't turn out very well to begin with. When I printed I think this piece is called the coupler. When I printed this in PETG, the little flap here that holds this tube down, that broke off basically right away. I did have a major break in the rear of the magwell, and after I had fired 3 shots, I think this is called Grip 5 AR, this broke, and I have a photo of that somewhere. But anyway, I decided that rather than reprint everything, some of the pieces seem fine, and so what I did is I reprinted about 5 pieces using what is supposed to be a carbon fiber infused high strength PLA. So those are the black pieces, and that's why you have this layout of colors. The ones that remain in PETG do seem pretty strong and resilient, and one of the issues that I had wasn't really my printing method so much, but the spool of PETG itself kept getting caught up, and so the printer would underfeed. Eventually I decided to just rewind the entire spool, and the parts that came out after that were much better. Alright, so here are some quick assembly notes if you are considering a Caliburn U. As Captain Slug states, you will need screwdrivers, but I have to assume that most people probably already have screwdrivers. One thing that I found basically invaluable for this version of the kit was an awl. This has a very sharp point, although the red thing is just a rubber protector so you don't stab yourself with it. But that was really useful for getting the lock nuts into the channels where they go, just due to the small tip. Although you probably could have gotten by with just a toothpick or something instead, but the awl is also very strong, and I knew the tip wouldn't break when I was trying to maneuver those. Now, I understand that since I ordered my kit, Captain Slug has actually replaced the lock nuts with something else. I think he said standoffs maybe. So you might not need a pointy thing quite as strongly as I did. The other major note that I will say is I wish that all of the screws were Phillips head. the large, actually I guess all of the, I forget what they're called, 632 maybe, all of these longer screws and the shorter screws but with the larger heads, they all use a flathead screwdriver. And I would have preferred if everything was Phillips head. Another assembly note is, I don't know if it's part of my printing tolerances or what, but this grip piece that goes into the U channels, the one that's black here, this does actually have some wiggle in it. And I noticed that the chunk of plastic that fits into the U isn't quite as thick as it is on other parts. I have not examined the model, so it is possible that that's just undersized in the model, but it is also possible that something went wrong in the printing process, although that happened with both versions of that I printed. I don't know. How do I like the U Caliburn? Well, I like it a lot, but I do not already own a regular Caliburn. I've used one on some other occasions, basically borrowing one, and I liked it a lot. I liked the regular Caliburn enough to want one, but like I say, it was the sale and the new design that got me to finally buy one. In particular, if you haven't kept up, the U-channel Caliburn is supposed to feature 30% less 3D printing, or 30% less print time, or less something, and it's supposed to be 20% lighter. It is actually still fairly heavy. I mean, there's a lot of metal in this, so maybe 20% less of the weight isn't that noticeable, but it's not like it's too heavy. My first evaluation of it, given that I haven't used it in a war, is that the K26, honestly, is a very stout draw. I can do it just fine, but I think over the course of a day, I think my arm would probably wear out in continually priming this blaster. So when I use it, primarily at the one that I know will allow for a higher power blaster like this, when I use it in a war, I'm probably going to pull the K26 and put a K25 spring in instead. I think their cap is either 200 or 225, and this should fit nicely with that. I guess let's go on to some chronograph numbers, because I'm sure that's the question you're all asking. Although, really, if you're already familiar with Caliburns, then the numbers that I come up with are probably not going to be that surprising, just because the mechanical part of the Caliburn should be more or less the same, and so you probably already have an expectation of that. So what I thought I would do is do FPS of K26 with full-length darts and with short darts. Now, what I'm using for the full length, K26 with full length and half length, and then K25 with full length and half length. What I'm doing is, unfortunately, for the speed measurement, I'm using elite darts just because that happens to be what most things seem to be measured against. That is never ever what I'd use in a war. And if you're wondering, yes, I do plan to implement a scar barrel. I have some under consideration. I'll probably go with this design, but I haven't tried stringing it or using it yet. And then my short darts are cut down. I think these are called men gun. So these are supposed to be relatively accurate, and I've just been running them in testing. I've been running them in a Katana magazine with the official jet adapter. The firing portion of FPS measurement is going to be done off camera, because if I don't do it that way, then the darts will ricochet back and hit me in the face. Actually, safety glasses would still be a good idea regardless, and then I will just show you the FPS results. So I'm going to start with full-length darts in K26 spring. One other thing, if you have not been following, is the U version of the Caliburn allows you to insert a magazine while the bolt is forward, and you can even top load it when the bolt is back. So I can insert this, and the bolt is simply pushing the top dart down, but it does insert the mag and lock in until you release it. That's pretty cool. Alright, so shooting a number of elite darts with the K26, I did get a minimum of 169.5. That seems kind of like an outlier. I also have a 206.3, but the average was 240. The high was 276, and I also had a 271.9 and a 262.7. So those are pretty hot, and definitely more than I would be allowed to use at the one war with the 200 or 225 cap. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is, using the jet adapter and a Katana magazine, I'm going to fire half darts on the K26 spring. Alright, so here are some of the results using half darts on a K26. I did have one that completely misfired at 64.2. That brought down the average. I had a number of 165, 169, but I had 3 in the 247, 251 range. So it's kind of all over the place. I think part of that, honestly, is my dart selection. If I was going to run this with short darts all the time, I'd probably want to pick up some Worker Gen 3s or something like that, and probably get some Talon magazines. The Katana, this is kind of an aside because I'm talking about the Caliburn, but the Katana magazine still fits pretty loosely in the jet adapter, and so it can be a little bit hard to get that lined up right. And but also one of the other things I'm seeing is that when I draw the bolt forward, I wasn't sure how many O-rings to put on here, and it's actually somewhat difficult. I have to actively pull forward to get the bolt all the way forward and get the better seal if I can. Now, if you want to change out the spring, technically the directions that Captain Slug provides say that all you really need, theoretically, is a single bolt back here that holds on the back 2 butt plates. However, optional is putting in some side screws as well. So it could either be 1 or I guess 2 or 3 screws that you have to take out to change out your spring. So I'm going to do that now in acceleration mode. Okay, so once the 1 or 2 or 3 screws have been removed, you just have to kind of wiggle this back piece off. Depending on your print tolerances, it may come more easily or more with greater difficulty. For whatever reason, I found that the PETG pieces that I printed were a tough fit into the U channel more so than the PLA pieces. Why that is, probably just print variances. So you pull this off, and these are held together by another screw, but you don't have to remove that in order to change the spring. Alright, so here is a lovely full-length K25, and thinking about it, before I even put this in the blaster, I'm going to try and square the ends so that the sharper edges do not dig into the blaster. Alright, so once you have the spring that you want to use, you can put it in the blaster first, or you can thread it onto the back butt. He said butt. Push this on, and screw everything back together. Okay, so putting in a new spring is pretty easy. So let's see how the draw weight of the K25 is. That's not bad. This is my first time actually putting in the K25 for this video live as I make it. It's not bad. So let's go ahead and fire some elite darts and some half darts with the K25. How did full-length darts do on a K25 spring? Well, I actually still had some pretty high shots. The average I got was 214, but I had a number of them over 240. I had some in the 140s, and I also had some that are not displayed on the list. I had some in the 170s, I think. So they're kind of all over the board. Now keep in mind, I wouldn't actually use these darts in an actual war. I would use something that gives me, quite frankly, greater accuracy. These are just used because they are ubiquitous and they're just something to use to compare to others. So how did K25 with half darts do? Well, those also were all over the board. I got an average of 147, but I had some that were below 100. I think those were mostly misfires, and I had a number of them well over 230 as well. So I got an average of 147, but I don't know that I can really use that. Again, these darts are mostly what I have on hand. I had anticipated being able to use the men gun darts in a Nerf war, but I'm not sure that cut down darts are really going to work for me. I have a number of them that are getting sliced up and destroyed. I think this might be due to my inexperience in making brass breeches, though. Here's one where the head came off fully. So I don't know. It definitely fires hard, and it probably should be more consistent when I can get used to how far I need to push the bolt into the barrel, because I know I'm not getting all 4 O-rings in there. You really have to. I probably shouldn't even be using 4 O-rings, but I'm not sure what the right amount would be. So I should probably come up with a conclusion. Do I like it? Yes. Will I use it in a high-speed Nerf war? Yes, I definitely would. If I was to go to something like APOC in New Jersey, I would totally bring this and use it as my main high-power Springer blaster. I think that the U design is interesting. It's probably a little less visually interesting, just because, especially if you add a shroud. I thought that the shrouds looked really weird. You had a section of it, then the top-loading thing that was open, and then more rail or shroud. But I honestly also think that this combination of colors looks pretty good too. I don't really mind that there's a big metal rail going down the entire side of the blaster. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this. I am very pleased with the outcome. If you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer to the best of my ability. You can also find me on some of the Discords, such as the RNerf Discord and usually the Wacom S7 Discord and a few others. Or check out my Instagram as well for other things that might come up. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.